everyone. Welcome back to Life Unpotted. Thanks for joining us for another episode. So, we are feeling really excited because we are planning an in-person podcast, a live podcast in Austin, Texas. It's either going to be at the end of February, probably March. So, if you're in the area or if you're going to be in the area, we would love to see you. We're going to start posting it on our social media over the next few weeks. We're going to have a few guests come. It's going to be driven to really talk about tapping into your creativity and a space for people to have an open conversation about creativity and the journey of figuring out what your passions is and your passion project. So super excited for that. Stay updated. We will be letting you guys know on the podcast, on our Instagram, on the website, newsletter. So wherever you follow along, check it out. Another community update, as always, we are having our community Zoom every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. These Zooms are a really great place to connect with the community about the conversation that we have, our thoughts, our emotions. Who really are we in this world beyond the thoughts up here? And connecting to a community, a like-minded community that is open-minded and wants to talk about these things, because we know it could be hard to find those deep conversations, people who are open, people who are thinking deeply, and that's what the space is for. So community Zooms weekly, and if you are a Patreon member, we have the extra Zoom at 8 p.m. Eastern, and then we have our Friday Zoom at 1 p.m. Eastern. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So it's been a very interesting few days. I feel like I've been having so many realizations. And I think it's a great time right now to just pause and let's just scratch the surface again on what is this conversation we've been having on this podcast? Like, what is this podcast all about? What is Life Unpotted all about? And today I was writing up a article for our Substack, and what I was writing about was really this understanding that we are not our thoughts. I have heard this my whole life. You're not your thoughts. You're not your mind. And I never understood it. Like, I never understood what that meant. And as I was writing this morning, it was just clicking again because I have been really caught up in my mind the past few weeks. I've been anxious. I've been insecure. I've been doubting myself. And I hit this moment of awareness, which, as we talk about on this podcast, is what we're doing is we're deepening our awareness. We're deepening our understanding of we're all on a planet right now in the middle of space, right? These thoughts that our mind tell us cannot be all there is. There has to be another experience. Some people call that multiple dimensions or whatever it may be. When we look at nature, when we look at this reality outside the limitations we've placed on ourselves, when we look at the way that the earth has come together, the fact that there's oceans and species and that I can see these insane capabilities, right? That is reality. And none of us really know how we got here or what happens when you die. But what we do know is that we have the ability to change our lives. And we have the ability to change the thoughts up here. But the first step in changing our lives is to remember, and this is a journey of continuously remembering that you are not the voice in your head. There is nothing happening beyond this very moment. Right now, in reality, nothing exists beyond the now. And it is so easy for our mind to worry about the future. And we live in this narrative. We start living in this narrative that we think, or we become so certain that in 5 minutes our life will be the same. In 1 hour our life will be the same, right? How do we know that? When we cling to this story, when we cling to this narrative and we become so convinced that our life is so small and we'll never be able to change and we'll never be able to create the life that we want because we believe what people have told us. We believe the fear that we don't see through the fact that when people express their opinions, they're just expressing what they've heard, maybe from their family, maybe from their friends. But are they connected to themselves, right? That is the question when we're discerning, when we're gathering information from the world. And somebody's saying, if you leave your job, it's going to be really hard for you. There would have been a time where I would have listened to that. But now, as I'm having these conversations with people, and there have been situations in which someone is like, "Oh, I don't know, that may be a hard ride for you guys." And I'm like, "Okay, let me pause and let me really think about this." And I've been talking for a little bit, so I kind of want to just wrap up this intro and pass it to Daisy. But what I'm really trying to get at is that there is a life beyond the narrative that we tell ourselves. We have the possibility to do two things in life. We can either limit ourselves by believing a story about what we can and can't do and listening to the thoughts up here, or we can recognize that life is uncertain. And the more we get comfortable with letting go of control and not clinging to certainty meaning, okay, it's certain that I'm going to fail. It's certain that life won't work out. Oh, I'm convinced that it's not going to work out. When we can let go of and recognize that we really have no idea what's going to happen, that's when the true magic begins. Because that's when we allow life flow to take its course.
Great introduction. We're really getting right into it today. So first things first, I think this conversation, what it really is about freedom. It's about freedom from your mind. It's about freedom from listening to your thoughts as factual. Our thoughts are not factual. And I had a really interesting experience this past weekend where we were hanging out with someone and I caught myself, we were talking a lot about businesses and we were talking a lot about different types of starting businesses and different business models. We were just kind of playing around with this idea. And I came to a realization that I started to get really anxious because I realized all I was doing was thinking about myself in that moment. And I felt myself suddenly feel stressed and concerned about the future and concerned about myself. And in that moment, I realized I had confined myself into my own jail cell, and it was restricting me from thinking expansively because I was thinking through a lens of fear. And thinking through a lens of fear only happens when we actually listen to our thoughts and we believe them to be factual, meaning what I'm doing is uncertain right now. So that is going to lead me to a place of somewhere bad because I don't know where that is. I'm not going to be able to have this. I'm not going to be able to have that. I think when we are in these places of uncertainty, we have to ask ourselves, why did we take the first step to get to this place of uncertainty in the first place? And I think when it comes down to it, we talk about freedom from our thoughts often, primarily because when we are able to let go of this attachment to our thoughts, that is when we are able to find total and complete freedom and we're able to detach from the thinking mind. The thinking mind is the perpetual conscious mind, and there's so much more to us than our conscious mind. When we're able to just quiet our mind, we realize that all of the problems that we think exist, that we start to feel in our body, because our body is just a reflection of our mind, we start to feel our body ache. We start to feel our body feel fatigued. We start to feel our body close up or shut down or get anxious, because those are all reflections of our mind. And that is something that I have been thinking a lot about recently, because sometimes it can be intimidating to pick up on continual thought patterns, because when we are breaking free from the mind, when we are letting go of ourselves, the idea of ourselves, basically what we're doing is we're looking to observe the thought, meaning when we are observing it, there's no possible way we can be it. Sure, observing it's not fun either, but at least you have the awareness that you are not it. And I recognize that I can sometimes struggle with identifying a thought, but I definitely identify things in my body primarily. And I think that is a really easy way to get started with observing the clarity or the messiness of our minds, because our bodies are simply a reflection, or they're a mirror of our minds. So if we're feeling really tense and we're feeling really stressed, I think it's asking ourselves, what's happening here? Why am I getting stressed in response to someone saying a certain thing? Do I need to do that? And I think those questions, what they do is they help you observe it as opposed to becoming it in a non-aware state. So I'm always relearning this because it's humbling to forget it and to have to relearn it on a large magnitude scale where I'll go 6 months and there's no issues. And then I'll get off and my mind becomes unclear. I become unmotivated, uninspired, scarcity. And what is this? The commonality here is that I'm just listening to my thoughts and I've lost awareness. I've lost separation. I've became my thoughts and I've lost the ability to observe them. And observing them is what gives you freedom from your mind. It doesn't happen overnight. I was just observing emotions last night that were coming up and it wasn't that fun. I'm like, this is not really helping. But today I'm feeling really clear. I'm feeling really inspired. So things take time, but it's always going to feel empowering to gain the ability to observe things as opposed to literally becoming them in the moment.
Well, it's interesting because you're saying like our thoughts, you can, so if we're thinking anxious thoughts, if we're caught up in our mind, like that will reflect not only like our body will feel achy, will feel tight, but we forget that our mind is what creates our experience in reality. Like there is no experience in reality outside of our mind. Like think about it. If you're not here, if you've died, where can you experience reality? Or when you're sleeping, are you experiencing reality? I don't know. But for the point of the example, it's to make clear that our experience in life, it's easy to look around and to say, there's one fixed way, there's one fixed experience in life. You go to college or you go to school, some sort of school, you get a job, you're miserable, you get married or you don't, and you're miserable, and life's hard, you have to suffer. You would say something?
Yeah, I do. Because that's an interesting picture to paint of you are miserable. You're doing all these things for life, but you're miserable. And what I'm learning, or I should say relearning, because I've learned this before, is that if you are miserable, it means that you are plugged into your thoughts on such an extreme level that you're addicted to them. And there is no separation between you and your thoughts. So when you are in a state of I am miserable, or I have no hope for the future, or I feel desperate for a change, but it's impossible because I am this way. I think where the trickles of freedom begin is when you're able to start observing those things as not you, but as things you're experiencing, because things are always in flux. So I just wanted to clarify that because I thought that was a good example.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the point I'm trying to make is like, so for me, right? Like I'm 30 years old and I have lived 30 years. And up until the point I was 26, the viewpoints I had about life were very limited. And it wasn't until I started asking, okay, where did I learn these beliefs from? Where did I learn that it's impossible to make money on your own? Where did I learn that I can't create this life that I want? Where did I learn that I was a lawyer, right? And I have to stay a lawyer and that there's no other path to go. And I vividly remember like being in the office for some days and talking to coworkers and being like, we're lawyers, like I don't know what else we can do, like, and my coworker being like, yeah, like there's really not else, like what are we can go, everyone's life sucks really, like every job sucks essentially. And I think it's interesting when I look back on that, because I was so malleable in my beliefs that I was like, part of me is like, I don't know if I believe that, but I was so influenced by what other people were saying because I didn't know. And what I've been reflecting on recently, as in the last 24 hours, is that I feel like I used to take everything everyone said at face value. I thought if somebody had an opinion, if somebody had a belief that they expressed to me, it had to be true. And it's like the classic example of like when I used to listen to podcasts and I'd be like, oh, I heard this on a podcast, this must be true. And it's like, you have to always remember all people are ever doing when they're expressing an opinion is expressing their thoughts and the way they view the world.
Which you have to think, are they someone who totally identifies with their thoughts? Is there no split between the observation of the thoughts as an experience as opposed to them. And I think this is an interesting point because we can be sitting in a conversation, feeling anxious about something, about the future, about what could happen, X, Y, and Z. And in that time, what we're doing is we're just looking for answers from one another. We're going to search for answers on Google. We're going to search for answers in podcasts. We're going to search for answers from people in person. We're going to search for answers from our parents, from our spouses, from our friends, from our partners. And as long as we're doing that, that is the mind trying to find an answer for you because the mind works for you, but oftentimes it doesn't. You're missing the ability to control it and it's controlling you. And bringing this back to looking for answers, we have to realize that no one has the answers. And I know the quicker we are able to realize that we have the answers more than anyone else, that's the closer to truth we're going to get. And the reason that is because when it comes down to it, you are confronting something. If you're taking accountability for finding the answer within yourself, you're confronting the real fear, the real truth. Because it's almost like looking for the answer from someone else is just a distraction technique. It's just a way that the mind is searching and it's searching and it's searching. Again, it's helping you solve why you feel anxious. But it's not working for you. You have to catch the mind and say, this answer is not going to solve my problems, and recognize that I have to accept that everything is uncertain. And I have to create a separation between this fear that is driving my mind to search for this answer in a way that is, I'm not trusting myself. Because when it comes down to it, I just know the quicker we are able to say, I know what is best for me, you're working with yourself. Versus if say you're going to start a business, or say you just had a kid and you're going around and you're asking people on the street advice. How should I take care of my kid? Should I do this or should I do that? And you just ask everyone you know, or starting a business. Like, it's insane to think that, but we spend our lives until we don't just looking for answers from someone because we want someone to tell us what to do. We want someone to tell us the answers, but nobody knows. Nobody knows anything. And you could be looking to someone who is controlled by their mind. So they're limiting your potential because they have limited potential within themselves. So they're going to have limited potential in the way that they see you. So I think the quicker you realize that, and I'm realizing that, and it's scary to recognize that, right, no one has the truth. And the quicker you are to realizing that, you're not going to fall for bullshit. And you're going to say, I'm in this experience and I'm okay knowing that there's no truth. And that is the ultimate power, because you recognize that all these fears that arise, when you tell people you leave your job, tell people you're using all your savings to live off of it, things that stir up fear in others, when you're on this path, it stirs up fear in others, which reflected back to you, because there is a lot of fear. There's so much fear. We're run by fear. But it gets to a point where we can deprogram our brains or deprogram ourselves from following exactly what our brains say and just keep moving forward without being attached to the brain. And we're just able to more and more and more observe what it is that we're experiencing, and we're not becoming it. I feel like I keep saying the same thing over and over and over again because it's something that's hard to comprehend. It's a feeling more so than it is through the mind.
Well, it's really like, think of an example when you're in flow state, when you're doing something that you're not thinking about. And I feel like more often than not, we forget that we can experience life without thinking. Think about when you're watching a movie or you're reading a book or you're doing something where you're not logically calculating this plus this plus this plus that, but you're experiencing. And it's so interesting. Like, I've been reflecting so much about this and just being on this journey where we left our careers and we are going on the quote unquote untraditional route. Just like, let's really zoom out as far as we can to remember we're all living this life on earth. Who decided what's traditional route? Who decided that, going back to when factory workers started after whatever era, and we decided that we should work in factories and then work in offices, this progression that's happened in society, who has been dictating this? I guess everybody in society, a bunch of human minds. So you get to a point where you watch movies like The Matrix or these kind of trippy movies where you're like, oh, our society has been run by human minds. And all we are is a bunch of human minds. But then also, to an extent, there's this level of awareness, this level of consciousness of the fact that I can be aware of the thoughts that I'm having, like Eckhart Tolle says in The Power of Now, the fact that he realized there was a thought that was like saying that he can't do something. And then there's a part of him that said, I'm done believing that. He realized that there was something beyond the thought. There is something beyond the thought. And that, I think, is awareness, consciousness, whatever this all is.
I just want to stop you there because I just want to expand on that. You said there's something beyond the thought. I think that is something that is really wise. I don't know if wise is the right word, but there's a lot to that phrase because it's really powerful. It's a really powerful statement. There's something beyond your thought. So to the listener, if you're sitting here saying, I want to get a raise, or I want to move to a different state, or I want to date someone, or I want to break up with someone, all of these things that you deeply believe that you can't do, there is something beyond the thought. Your brain has just programmed you to believe that because it's probably a thought you have 100 times a day subconsciously. So that has trained your subconscious brain to say, yep, this is true. And you feel it in your body, you know it. But the reality is you just don't know anything differently. So there's nothing that's stopping you from making the change that you want other than you yourself. And that's where it comes into hand to observe the thoughts. Because as you're able to observe these thoughts as they come up, you're able to separate them from you. And it can get to a place where you're laughing at these thoughts because you're like, that's insane that I thought that about myself. But it takes a lot of time to get there of simply just observing it. Because there's something really empowering about observing the thought because you know you are not the thought. You're separating yourself. So just going back to what you said, there is something beyond the thought for everyone.
And it makes me think of like being like 23, 24, 25, living in New York City, dating. And I would go on these dates with people and someone wouldn't text me back. And I would be full of anxiety, of fear of this isn't going to work out. And at the moment, I didn't have the awareness to understand what was happening. All I knew was that I feel really anxious. I feel really shitty because this person might not respond to me. And that's such a simple but probably relatable example of times, or, for example, you're applying to a job and you're waiting to hear back and they haven't emailed you for a week. So you're like, oh, I'm not getting the job. It's not going to work out. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, you get an email from HR and they're like, we're so sorry, we've been flooded. We'd love to bring you in for the interview. But you were so confident that you weren't going to get the job. Or then the person texts you back because they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I got caught up. Oh, my grandma passed away this weekend. I actually haven't been on my phone. When we're so caught up in thinking about I, and we're so caught up in fear, and we settle upon this answer that this thought's arising that this isn't going to work out, I'm firmly believing that. I'm confident that my thought is fact. But why don't we ever doubt our doubts? Why are we never sitting here saying, all these terrible things are coming up, all these terrible things, and in our example, I'm not going to be able to make money, I'm going to have to go back to working as a lawyer or whatever, I'm not going to be able to figure it out. All this pressure gets put on you, all this anxiety, you have to solve it right in this moment. But we forget that there's another route. And that's where we let go and we say, oh, I don't know how any of this will unfold. I don't know if I'll get the job. I don't know if the person will text me back. I don't know if my knee's going to heal in the next 2 months because I fell from a sports injury. I don't know. And our ability to relax into that uncertainty and recognizing that life is uncertain, life is unknown. It is our desire, or really, we have an issue with that because we want to grab onto something. We need someone to look at us and say, it's gonna be okay. So we look at our external events and we say, I need to know it's gonna be okay, so I have to know that all these things will pan out. But what we don't recognize is that when we're looking to external events for our sense of peace and relaxation and ease, When I'm spending my whole life being like, I need this to work out, I need this tax, I need this job, I need to make this money. I'm so anxious, I'm so anxious, I'm so anxious. We're not recognizing that we don't need anything to unfold a certain way for us to be at peace. We don't need X amount of money to be coming in. We don't need that person to love us. We don't need anything. If our car broke down in the middle of the street, do we have to react? Do we have to get frustrated? Do we have to panic? Or can we control those reactions? Can we separate ourselves and not let our emotions and our mind control and rule our entire experience in life? So it's really about recognizing that when we put so much pressure on things happening a certain way, and I've seen this after leaving my job of like, I'm so scared that, or I've been so scared that things are going to work out. I've paused and asked myself, like, why am I so worried about this? Oh, right, because I think that if that doesn't happen, I'm going to have to be anxious. If that doesn't work out, then I'm going to have to feel a certain way. And it's like, no. Like, the way you feel is not based off of anything external. The way that you feel is a conscious decision that you're deciding to do right now. And the perfect example, I think it was either Eckhart Tolle or Michael Singer, like when you're on your couch for a month feeling depressed and the person you're waiting for to call you back calls you and you jump up and all of a sudden you feel revived. It's like, it's not the fact that person called you back. It is the association that your mind has created about that external event, linking it to your behavior and saying, I will be happy when. But we don't recognize that in this moment, we can let go and reach that state of fulfillment that we're looking for.
That example is really interesting because it paints the picture that we're able to change our energy state, not from sleeping, not from food, but sheerly from the glob our brain is. Like, I think that is such a good example because think of it, when you've been broken up with, or when you're on a break with your partner, you don't feel good. You just think this person is the person who, if they text me, then they'll make me happy. And then all of a sudden they text you. It's like you've been holding on to this thought that put you into this depression, and then you let it go. But you can let it go in so many ways if you choose to let it go. It's almost like when we hold on to a thought, when we hold on to a belief, when we hold on to an experience as us, it's like in that moment, we have chained ourselves to hell. We are the ones who are chaining ourselves to hell. So how do we unchain ourselves? We have to understand there is something beyond the thought. The thought itself is just a ring in Dante's Inferno of taking you to hell. We can catapult straight back to earth or heaven or whatever you want to call it, as we become aware. It's all about becoming aware because we are constantly going to experience different things in this life that are not a good experience. But as long as we are aware of them, we are not going to become them. And when we become them, that is when we get stuck. Like this guy in this example of, he became his thought of, I'm now a single guy and I'm broken up with and I feel like shit. Well, this person wanted to get back with him, and all of a sudden he is no longer fixed in this depressive state. He's energized and excited. So there's no reason right now to the listener, if you are feeling in a mal state, there is something beyond that. There is always something beyond that when you are looking at your brain and your mind and the way that you see this life. And I've experienced it. I've been so stuck in things. I've been being like, why did we leave New York City? Why did we move out of Brooklyn? Why did we do this? All of our friends are living their lives. They're so integrated. Da 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 da. And it's so easy to just get stuck into that cycle. And I've been in it for a few days. And when you come out of it, you're like, that is the biggest load of crap ever because I'm just not participating in my life. Instead of participating in my life right here in this moment, I'm creating this narrative of how things could have been, but they wouldn't be, because the grass is always greener, and this is the decision I made, and this is where I'm at. And it's so important to catch yourself thinking, oh, this is so ridiculous, because you're missing out on all of the opportunity that literally is here in this moment. In this podcast always brings me back to that. And I was thinking the other day, you might listen to this podcast and think, Daisy and Sophie have it figured out. Like, they don't have any worries. They have no concerns. They just live their life totally free. And that is so far from the truth. This podcast always helps me, because this conversation, it's not us. It's this conversation. It's the seed that is planted within every single human being, within every person, everything. And it's just a matter of tapping into it. And we tap into it when we podcast, and sometimes we stay in it. Oftentimes we leave it. Sometimes we don't. And I think that's important to note, because no one is ever fixed in this. People might get really good at observing their thoughts, but no one's ever without observation of their thoughts. And that's what keeps me going. That's the reason for this podcast, this conversation, is because it has tremendously changed the way I experience life. And that's what this is. It is an experience to remind you, to show you how the hell to observe your thoughts and to not become them. Because when you do that, you are able to be free. You can experience anything because you can realize that you're here, and that's more than enough.
And not only are you here, like exactly what you were saying a few minutes ago, of like, you can get so caught up in the story of, I'm so upset that happened. I'm going to dwell on it for 5 years. All of a sudden, you're like 40 years old and you're like, I'm still caught up in this idea of myself. I'm still caught up in thinking that no one likes me, or that I don't have a voice that deserves to be heard, or that people are judging me, or that I'm overweight, I'm over this or that, I'm unattractive. The list goes on. The list will always go on. And it's not that those thoughts don't go away. We always have the option to tap into them. I could sit here right now and decide, I hate this podcast, I never want to do it. I'm going back to being a lawyer. I give up myself. I'm stupid. It's never going to work out. That's always there. And there's been times, and the times, it's almost like this warp. It's saying like, here's all the terrible things that can happen, and there's another option. And what's happened to me recently is that the other option, the other route that isn't full of fear, that isn't full of concern, that is full of trust in myself, has become much more attractive to take. And I think what that really is me recognizing it's kind of insane to believe all that other shit. It's like, why would I believe that a bear is chasing me right now in the middle of my safe apartment in Austin? Why would I believe these ridiculous statements of it's never going to work out?
But we do that.
But we do that.
We do that.
Yes, and that's the thing.
It's that I'm 6 months into living in a new place. I fucked up. My life sucks because I'm not here, back in this city that I left. I'm going backwards. My life sucks. It's so boring. Like, we do this every day. We do this every day. So let this be a reminder to just begin to observe those things.
And that's a story that you're living in. And what I really want to get across in this episode is to the listener, like, write down the stories that, right? I think we all have one major story about our life, right? Like, you know, it's interesting because, like, when you think of a biography, you probably think of, you know, Sophie grew up in New York, went to law school, went to college, whatever. You see all these things externally. But what if we heard a biography of someone's inner world? Sophie grew up and was extremely insecure until the age of 18. And then when she was 18, she thought because of her high school experiences, thought that no one liked her and that her voice didn't matter. So she went on to believe that for the next 5, 6, 7 years, trying to fit into the group in high school that she never fit into to validate this belief that she had of not thinking she's good enough. But then when Sophie was 25, she started saying, wait, maybe there's more to life. But we don't all have the awareness, and it's no one's fault, right? I think life is hard. Like, it takes time to stop and to pause. And that's why we are doing this, to share with all the other people that your thoughts aren't true. But think about Sophie who didn't break that narrative. And then all of a sudden I'm 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old. And I see this. I've seen this in people who are in their 60s. Of I look at them now with this awareness, I'm like, wow, it's almost like you were still 13. And I think we all are beneath the thoughts. We all are just like that sad kid who never healed. Or we all are that sad teenager or whatever that big life event, wherever it started. I think it starts somewhere for everyone. Something happened, some experience happened. For me, that was high school. And just thinking that, like I thinking people didn't like me, like just getting bullied and all this stuff. And I think for some of us, maybe that's generational trauma from the parents. Maybe it was not getting into the college they wanted. But I think there is always some root where it starts. Maybe life is just hard for everyone because it's hard to be human. We're going to die. We don't know what's going on. But I also do, I think there is some root. But I think what happens is that when we don't look at that and we don't confront what has happened in our lives, when we don't confront the truth of what has unfolded when we were 15 years old, and I faced a lot of shit the past year by facing that, but it is facing that that frees you because you realize that, yes, that might have happened in the past, but it's not happening anymore. And there's so much life that you can experience when you're not being held by the shackles of the past, of this idea of all these experiences, thinking that defines who you are today.
I also want to add that there is a fine line with saying, I'm healing from this and I experienced this. I think there's a point in which you heal enough, you face it enough to where you can, and then you stop thinking about how that happened to you. Because the more you think about that happening to you, it's still going to be alive within you. I think it's really important to just not allow those moments that you reenact those experiences from things that maybe happened to you from growing up, from random incidents that happen to all of us that bring shame and bring all these fear and bring all these things. But I think it's really important to acknowledge it, face it, and then move on and be aware that maybe these tendencies that you've worked through might come back up, but it doesn't have to be deep. And I'm specifying there is a difference between healing and then perpetuating this idea of healing, that it becomes your new story, that you're healing, because I think that is going to stunt you, I think, because we can move past that. That is important, but it's not an everyday thing. Maybe for a period of time it is, but there's a period where you have to let go. Maybe you get too comfortable with that idea. You get too comfortable with, this happened to me. That's why this is why I'm having this reaction. Okay, so let go of that and just observe what comes up and say, oh, I'm observing this. This is not my thoughts. This is just something that maybe happened in the past, but that doesn't matter anymore because I'm just observing and I'm aware that I'm not this. At the end of the day, that's the point that you get to, is that you're observing things. You are not becoming them. You're just observing them. And once you do that, you let go of the brain, because if you're saying this happened to me and you're perpetuating this story, that's still the mind. It's still you believing the mind. And that subconscious thought is still activating over and over and over again, and it's still existing and it's still alive. So I say this because I see the difference, and maybe it's a fine line, but I really do see that it's important for us to let go of everything and any association with anything and to move on, because we are not that. We are not that. We are just in this moment now. And if we are observing a thought that's connected to that, something from the past, we don't have to actively connect it in our mind to that. We can just observe it and move on, because that is what we're meant to do. We're meant to exist in the moment.
Yeah, and that's not to say, like, of course, I think a big difference I've noticed with healing and all this stuff is that I don't attach to the story as much anymore. Like, if an intense emotion starts to come up, like the other day I just got sad. Well, first I got angry, and I found myself wanting to be like, I'm getting mad, I'm getting angry. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go into my room. And I just cried. And I meditated, and I switched out of this anger into the feeling. And then I moved on. And I feel like in the past, I would have been like, oh, that's because I'm thinking about my dad, or I'm thinking about this. And it's like, is it? Like, where is this line between when we're healing, like the stories we tell ourselves about how that impacts who we are today. And it's like, that doesn't mean we don't feel the intense emotions when they come up, but it means we let ourselves feel the emotions. We don't create the story up here. And this is where it comes down to you start experiencing your body more. Like you start experiencing what it means to actually feel without the disruption of thought. And that's what we didn't do when we had these initial experiences because we didn't know how to process. And I think what I'm learning is processing and healing and feeling isn't always something we do by thinking about it. It's this crazy thing our mind and body does on its own when we just let go and we accept and we allow ourselves, we allow the emotions to take their course. When they come up, they do. And I don't doubt that I will be facing stuff in the future. I don't think it ever ends. And that's why I think it's so easy when we're always like, I'm healing, I'm healing, I'm healing. It's like, maybe we're healing our whole life. Great. But let's not hold back from enjoying life. Like, let's move forward.
Right. Like, don't let that become the identity that you settle upon and get comfortable with. Because when you do that, you're only limiting yourself. And I can see how that's possible. Because I'm sure I did that, going to therapy. And, so you need to learn self-compassion. You need to learn things. But you have to be careful with over-identifying, well, this happened to me. That's why I'm this way. And that's why I can't do this. I think that's a common thing of, I can't do this because this happened to me. And that's where the stories get dangerous because it stops us from actually facing it sometimes. Or it might come to a point where we've been facing it or we think we're facing it and we're feeling our emotions and we're crying. But the reality is that nothing in life is that serious. Once we are able to acknowledge, I'm not undermining like working through emotions, like things are serious at times, but it's letting go. It's like taking the fucking scissors and cutting them from what it is, the story that you just experienced. It's letting yourself fully experience it and not judge it, fully experience it. Cry so hard that your face is swollen. Do what you have to do and then cut the cord. Just cut it and move on. Because if it's just there sitting around, we're never going to separate from it. It's going to become our identity. We are never meant to become the pain that happened to us. We're meant to face it, experience it, and then move the fuck on and not look back and not let these stories come forward to define what our present and future moments will look like.
And of course, like we're moving on and we say this with passion, but it's not to undermine, like, I have learned how to move on while also saying this is always going to be with me. And that's okay. It can be there. But it doesn't mean that every single morning I have to give attention to it. It's fine on its own. It's in the room hanging out, right? When we think about the rooms of our house, okay, all that stuff that happened, maybe it's always in that room, but it's under the covers, it's watching TV, it's going to be fine. Like I gave it the attention it needed. I gave it the love it needed. I don't have to keep revisiting it until it tells me I do. And then I will. But that's the line. That's the difference of getting connected to our bodies and starting to know the difference of, am I perpetuating this or am I just experiencing what's arising?
Right, because we might fall into the pattern of thinking that since we've had something arrive or we've had something arise, that it's because X, Y, and Z. And that's where the pattern begins. That's where the story begins. But it's just becoming self-aware of our emotional states and having some fun also. Like not just getting stuck in this idea of things are hard, life is difficult because I'm facing stuff. I think it's really important to just let go sometimes and like not really care about anything. I think it's important to let go. I think it's one of those things where with our mind, you can never fully trust it. You always have to be questioning your mind. You always have to be observing what it's telling you because it might be lying to you. Your mind might be lying to you.
And I'd say most of the time it is lying to you. Like 99% of the time when we're in a thought loop, it's out of anxiety.
Well,
when is it ever not? When we're really understanding something, it's out of relaxation. And I think what I just want to mention before we close out the conversation is that the point of all this is to, like you said, like to have fun. Like as I've stopped attaching to all these anxious thoughts, it's opened up the space now for me to go roller skating or learn that I want to start learning how to embroider clothing or journal or write more. Like, the point is to learn to have fun in life. And when we can let go of these thoughts that hold us back of I have to stay in my apartment because I'm so anxious, I'm so scared, I can't go outside, I can't socialize, I can't do the things I actually want to do, we miss out on figuring out who really are we beneath these thoughts. Like, who is this being
Right.
that has all these interests and all these passions and has the ability to impact the world?
Well, the truth is the mind can take up 80% of your capacity, of your energy. It can take up so much of your energy, and the point is to clear up that energy and to just be so unconcerned in the moment, to not be consumed by your brain of the future, the past, whatever. It's to just sit in peace and do whatever the hell it is that you want to do. It's to just exist without having the mind tell you that something's wrong.
And recognizing that peace is an inner state. We're always talking about inner states, inner worlds, because that is what comes first. Like, our inner world is a foundation to this entire experience called life. It is the most important thing that we can cultivate and water and grow, because our inner world, our mind, becomes the way that we experience reality. You want to change your life? Change your thoughts. Change the story that you're believing.
Well, it's funny. I've really been trying to observe if there's any sort of, like, I guess, quote unquote, disturbance that I'm experiencing. I'm trying to observe why. What is happening here? And because I feel like right now, I'm feeling like something funky right now. And
I could sense that. I feel like you got a little frustrated.
yeah.
What was that?
I think maybe it's something along the lines of like feeling like I'm being talked over or like I'm not able to talk. And I think so I'm just trying to become aware of that in this moment and realize that I am not that. That is just something I'm experiencing because my body blah, 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 experienced me in the past, but whatever. It's like, okay, what's helpful here is to observe the fact that something in me is uncomfortable, but that is not me. So as soon as I'm able to do that, I can almost feel a shift of it's not permanent and it's just something that I'm experiencing. I'm aware of that. And that's fine. Like, that's okay. But I wanted to illustrate that because it can be something that comes up within 5 seconds and you're like, why did that just come up? Why do I feel uncomfortable? You're talking to your coworkers and you're like, why do I feel uncomfortable right now? It's like, are you feeling socially awkward? Are you thinking about yourself? What are you observing? Are you observing that something you're fearful that
You're thinking.
right, exactly.
You're thinking. Like, if you ever start feeling weird all of a sudden, it's like, oh, right, am I some sort of thought is going on in the background right now? Like, I'm telling myself something until you go, oh, I don't even believe that.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because if we're ever not feeling like how we want to feel, it's because we're believing our thoughts. So it's that example I just gave. It just shows how easy it is for our thoughts to be sneaky and for them to sneak up and taint our glasses of how we see the world without us knowing. And I guess the goal is to just be curious. Is to be curious of, if you're unhappy in an experience, be curious with your mind. Why? What judgment am I passing on myself right now? Or is there anger coming up because I feel like I'm being silenced? Like, it's just acknowledging that, oh, right, that happened. Okay, I'm experiencing that. This might be uncomfortable, but at least I'm observing it. At least I know that there's a separation between me and this thought.
And it's almost like the visual of, like, say, like, my glasses I'm wearing right now, okay? I put these on. These are the way I see the world. Without it, it's kind of blurry. So as my glasses are on, if all of a sudden my glasses start getting foggy, I'm not going to freak out, oh my God, I can't see. I'm going to go, there's just fog on here. Let me clean it off. So it's like, as soon as our vision gets distorted, as soon as we're feeling angry, reactive, jealous, insecure, worried about the future, thinking about the future, worried at all, unless you're quite literally experiencing something in this very moment that's happening, you're in the ER room and you're watching someone in surgery. Even then, can you find the space to pause? But what I'm trying to say is, like, can we just have this deep understanding to know that our base state is the clarity through our lens, And as soon as there's some distortion here, we don't have to start thinking it has anything to do with us. We just say, oh, some dirt got on here. Let me wipe it off. Oh, those are just my thoughts. My perception's only foggy. I'm only feeling these things when I'm listening to the mind. So can I just not listen to the thoughts? And do not try to reason with your thoughts. If your mind is telling you the story that all these things are going to go wrong, as soon as you start saying, oh, I'm worried this is going to happen, but maybe not, like you're going down the same loop. You cannot find a solution through something that created the problem in and of itself. You cannot find answers through thought by thinking. You find answers through letting go.
Well, it's interesting because I feel better. How do you perceive me?
Like you let go a little bit.
Right? So that's why it's so exciting when you stay curious, because you can change your state and you can loosen the grip you have on your mind. And it's really empowering to show you how much control, and I say control lightly, how much control you have over how you view your mind and how you view this world. You have control over your experience because it all starts with your internal experience. And as soon as we're able to make friends with our internal experience and work with ourselves, things are going to get a lot easier in the outside world.
Everything will get easier. Everything will get more comfortable. Life will be kind of a breeze.
Because you're working with yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure everyone's been there where you're trying to write a term paper the night before, where you had a full semester or a full 4 weeks to plan it out to write it. Think about the extreme anxiety you have the night before, and maybe that works for some people. But in my case, I remember feeling super anxious. I could never get anything done because I was just so anxious. I was so caught up. I was so fearful about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So it made this act of just writing, which is innate to humans, is innate to us. It made it so difficult because I was so stuck in my mind. And I was so working against myself, almost wanting to prove a point that I couldn't do it. And I think we do that every day. We do that all the time. It's almost like we want to prove that our brains are right. Because as soon as we say, I'm angry right now, there could have been a scenario where I wasn't curious with the example I just gave, and I didn't question, why am I feeling a little funky right now? And I didn't state it, and I didn't say, oh, it's maybe because X, Y, and Z. Oh, right. I'm going to observe that and move on. If I wouldn't have done that, it could have come off into my body language, which it was. It could have gone further into me saying something out of anger. It could have came off in me reacting out of anger towards something totally neutral in the perspective of reality that's clear without these fogged up glasses. So I like that example you gave of if you are a glasses wearer like Sophie, and all of a sudden like you walk into a steamy room that is foggy, you're not going to be like, oh my God, my vision, it's ruined for life. You're going to take your glasses off and you're going to clean them. You're going to polish them, whatever you do with glasses. And then you're going to put them back on and you're going to be like, oh, I see clearly now. And it's like, that is almost what we need to do with our life. We need to hone in our ability to take our glasses off for 3 seconds and to say, why am I feeling funky? Why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling sad? Why am I feeling X, Y, Z, fill in the blank based off what you're feeling, listener? And then say, oh, I'm observing that I'm feeling this way. And that's okay. I'm going to put my glasses back on. I'm going to go back to living. And I'm not going to let this send me into a state of reaction. And that's a really exciting way to live life, because life then feels longer. Moments feel longer because you're actually experiencing them with clear glasses. But oftentimes we go through life with foggy glasses and we don't know how to take them off because we find that the foggy glasses are glued to our head and we don't even know that there's glasses there. We think that's just how we see through our life, but we have to learn to find how to take them off.
There you have it. That was a good conversation. I think just to wrap it up, I think it's just always coming back and like I feel like I had the recognition the first time this past weekend again of like we're always going to be caught up, but maybe we don't have to be. Maybe it's letting go of that narrative that we'll always be caught up, and maybe it's about recognizing that we can live an open, fulfilled life, but it's up to us. to let go of the pressure, to let go of listening to the mind and embrace not knowing, embrace being here now, and realize that we're existing on a planet. Like, what is, like, this is insane. It's insane we even are here. How did we even get here? Can't we just appreciate it for what it is? And
it all starts with observing your thoughts.
It all starts with observing your thoughts. That'll probably be the title of today's episode.
Let it be a game.
Yeah, let it be a game.
Let it be a game.
You don't have to take it so seriously.
How many times throughout the day can you observe a nasty feeling that you don't like?
And it's like when you're playing a video game, you don't think that's you. You don't have to identify with the character. Just observe it.
How high can you get your score?
Yeah.
We create a video game.
Oh
Life
my God.
Unpotted. No,
That's
but
funny.
This conversation really helped me today. So thank you for allowing this to be here to the listeners. And just again, gonna plug the event we have coming up. If you are in Austin, if you will be in Austin, beginning of March this year, it's gonna be really exciting. We're putting a lot of thought, a lot of work into this. It will be recorded, so it will turn into a podcast, but it's gonna be a really great event. We're excited to start branching out into that environment. We really want to get involved within the Austin community scene and get in touch with people within the local Austin area, because the more people you meet, the more powerful the conversation becomes, and the more powerful we all realize we all are. So very excited that you're here today. You're listening to this, and we're going to continue to stay on our game, get back into it, and we're probably going to find a way to have more episodes coming soon, because 2 just doesn't feel like enough right now. You know, that's how we always feel when we get back into podcasting, because it's the experience of remembering that we don't have to be our thoughts.
It's funny. People are like, what do you mean getting back into it? Like, it just shows our inner experience.
It's all the inner experience.
That's all it is.
It's an exciting place to explore. So thanks for listening today. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you on Thursday.
Talk to you guys on Thursday. Thanks for listening.